Okay, there it is. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is the September 28th, 2020 School Board Workshop. We'll be discussing equity tonight, and I'm so glad to see all of you here. So it is 6:02, and I will call this meeting to order. First up is roll call, and we, of course, need to do that one at a time. So I will start with Mr. Bryant.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Here.
Mr. Derricks.
Here.
Ms. Fair.
Present.
Ms. Jones.
Present.
Ms. Tower.
Here.
And Chair is here. All board members are present. And if you would join me, we'll stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. As we always begin, I will read our mission statement. The mission of the Red Wing Public Schools is to educate and inspire all students as they realize their full potential and become respectful, responsible, and productive citizens. So the agenda for this evening is quite simple. We have some presentations on equity and what we're currently doing, and I would like to spend some time before we depart, and hopefully we can, as a board, come up with 1, 2, maybe 3 at the most initiatives that we can be focused on as a board and move forward in that vein. I think equity is a very broad topic, but I think we really need to narrow our focus and have a very specific goal or two in mind as we direct our superintendent and his team to address this issue with perhaps keeping in mind what our top priorities are. And with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Anderson and Ms. Whitcomb. And if you could give us some background on what we're currently working on, the frameworks and the initiatives that are currently in place.
Yeah, I'll just jump in real quick, and then Jess will take over. As you mentioned, Pam, tonight's topic has to do with equity planning. We realize it's a critical need, not only here, but throughout the community and country. And we're going to share a little bit about what we've done so far, the process moving forward, and what we're hoping to do in the future. And one thing that I think we all recognize is that this topic needs a lot of feedback from stakeholders. We need a lot of time to really analyze issues and move forward in the right way. And at the same time, as I heard at the June 25th Human Rights Council, we don't want to just keep planning and talking. We want to take action. And so together, I think we can figure out what the right plan is and what actions we should be taking. And we're gonna have to do that together. So really, Jess, if I could just turn it over to you, and you can share what we'll share kind of the plan and what we want to do moving forward.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. Thanks for letting me come tonight. If you're okay, I'm gonna put my screen up here, and this kind of just leads me through a little bit of what we have done. The majority of time, though, will be you guys able to discuss, because the reason we're doing this, here we go. The reason we're doing this is because of the school board asking for a workshop on equity. So I just want to be sure that we remember why we're here tonight is for you guys to be able to discuss. Oh, that part didn't load. So the why, is that coming up now for you guys? Okay, so the why, the part that didn't load is just the fact that this was requested before everything got crazy with COVID. We talked about future workshops, and this was one of the ones that was requested by multiple board members. And so that's why this is the meeting. It's been on the schedule for a while. And because it aligns directly with our vision and our mission, our core values, equity is laced within every one of those. And then if you look at the strategic directions that you all were a part of supporting, creating a responsive, safe, open, and respectful environment across all schools and programs, that's where we're going to lead into the strategic direction where we took direction in making this plan. And so because of that, our priority for these next 3 years to 4 years is based on the referendum of having that social emotional learning and equity are intertwined. So our first year of planning, really, I don't know why that's not loading. Our first year of equity was based on social emotional learning. Does this come up for you guys now? Okay. It might be that my graphics aren't loading, but in talking to actually Michelle Lizey at the city, they have done a lot of equity conversations with their city council, and one of the things that she said had been really helpful in their discussions was just to start it off with remembering that this discussion is uncomfortable, and that we are all going to make mistakes in talking about this, and just to always remember to please assume positive intent of all of the people sitting in this virtual room. It's a little bit hard to have an equity conversation where I can't see everyone, and I'm sure the same goes for you all. I also would like to be very honest about the fact of having an equity conversation recorded, and also putting that extra pressure on the people in the room is a difficult thing. So I just want to be open and honest about those different things that are interacting with our discussion tonight, but it's worth it. This work is worth it for us and for our kids. So let's work through this tonight as a jumping off point, and just remember that why we're doing it. So these are different norms that we can start with. I know that we talked about these a long time ago. These are directly from Beyond Diversity training, but we've utilized them in the high school and district-wide to just very simply to speak your truth, meaning only speaking from your experiences that you've had really helps to ground the conversation, to stay engaged. So it's awesome to see everybody's camera going so that we can kind of read each other during this discussion, and then experience discomfort. Allow yourself to kind of think outside of what you normally have thought about and how our school district has functioned. And then in all of these conversations with equity, to always remember to expect and accept non-closure. Just to know that this is an ongoing discussion. The purpose of working with equity is for improving and always improving and continuously knowing that we're going to always grow and get better. That's what we do as humans. So as we keep going, I was asked to provide a working definition of equity to kind of start the conversation. So I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen this before. This is kind of the third 18th iteration of this graphic here before you. You can kind of see the difference between equality and equity. And then there has been a third graphic that comes up that talks about justice. So this has been circulating in a lot of different diversity trainings, a lot of different equity trainings, to talk about really simply the difference between equality, meaning equal, and equity, meaning fair. So like very simply, that is something to work off of. But what I would really like is if you guys had a chance to kind of start your working definition as a board so that you guys can move forward with that together. So as you go, like this is another one that is utilized a lot in different trainings as far as equality versus equity. Where are our resources going? And to think about that as a possibility of equity versus equality. I don't know if people wanted to look at this one a little bit more. because I am going to ask kind of what are some things that you're seeing in this? What are some things that are hitting home? What are some things that you're wanting to talk about in this? So this is the last, I don't know why that disappeared. So in thinking of, based on these two images here and what you have come to know about equity yourself, is there anyone who would like to share things that pop up out to you in those two images, or take a stab at a working definition of equity, being that this is a workshop and we do want to include what the direction the board is wanting to go in all of our planning.
Jess, I just have equity and equality. Those two seem to be so much sounding a little bit alike. So how do they come up with equality? I know how they come up with equity, but equality is kind of those slides. I have not seen those slides before, and I was trying to read them, and I gotta get really close to the screen here. Assumption everyone benefits from the same. Yeah, okay. Equality and equity is everyone gets the support they need. Okay, all righty, gotcha. Appreciate you explaining that. Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else?
Well, the one with the people watching the soccer game is much easier to understand than the sewage one. But I think what's interesting or what works in this one is that there's limited resources shown, which are the boxes. So when everybody gets something so that they're all getting an equal amount, that's equality. And when there's equity, the resources are distributed differently so that everybody has a chance to watch the game. The justice is something that's well beyond us at this point, but I think it's good to show the distribution of resources being different in order to get to an equitable level so everybody can participate.
Anybody else?
Okay,
All
I had to
right.
wait till my husband stopped rattling the pans. I don't want to limit ourselves by saying the justice picture isn't attainable. I think we should be striving toward that because it really changes the framework. And I agree with everything else Mike said. As I was thinking about anticipating this conversation tonight, this picture to me is showing students, but I think we have other issues beyond students. But certainly we need to have some tough conversations, I think, about resource allocation and what does that mean? Are the students getting what they need?
Can you talk more, Heidi, about what you mean on the other?
So I think we need to break down. I think the current conversation is a lot about racial equity, and I understand why that's top of mind right now. But I think we have some equity issues when it comes to the impacts of poverty. And I think when we had the 2008 recession, and then we saw the demographics in our community change quite noticeably, except a lot of people didn't notice because a lot of the folks in charge were the white middle class folks. And I think we failed to understand the impact of poverty on family and student life and fully understand how we needed to change our education delivery or practices or training. I think we tried hard and I think we made progress, but I think the board was separate from that. I think we also, not just students, but so one of my questions was, what is the role of the district advisory council? Should that be more diversified so we have different conversations about what those folks are looking at for student achievement in the community? Grading practices, I think, is another one we need to examine because some of the old-timey stuff is really inequitable. And I'm not sure if some of that's still happening and other or not. I hope not, but I'm not clear on that. For instance, back in my kids' day, they would get extra credit for bringing in 5 tissue boxes versus 1. Well, that's not a knowledge standard, that's family wealth measurement, and that's not a fair way to grade children or give them points. I think if you look as a district, there's something out there like an equity dashboard report that I hope is in the future of this district, and it relates to how are we staffed, and that's a really complex conversation too, because I know the desire is you should have more people of color. But in reality, those folks aren't there in this state or even across the nation as far as they're the folks not getting enough, being encouraged to pursue careers. So it's all connected. Context for the whole community. Who belongs? Because right now, if you're trying to recruit staff of color, do they want to move to a community that has a parade of pickup trucks yelling white power out the window? So stealing flags from their neighbors. So I think there's a whole lot here, and I think that's what Mike was alluding to earlier, was like there's a lot. And then we still have, special needs. How are our EL populations? Are they getting a variety of services that make a difference, that move them along that achievement path? If they need to accomplish a year and a half's worth of learning in a year, what is that looking like? And I'm not sure we've got a full grasp on that either. So I know I've said a lot, but you asked me for other, and to me, there's a lot of other out there. And so I put it on the table. Thank you.
That's exactly what we're looking for tonight, Heidi. This is a discussion for you guys to put it all on the table.
Well, if I could just interject just on this, the picture with the equity, and that feels better, to see everybody's able to watch the game. But I always think about, how did they get to the game? How did they get there? So there's so much more behind being able to redistribute just to see that game. Was there transportation that?
Oh,
I'm back. Was their family supportive? Do they even want to be there at that game? Well, they're raising their hands, so I suppose so. But I just feel like there's so much more behind getting them to that place, which is what I think Heidi was getting at, is all of those bigger topics for that nice picture to come together. But we all know there's so much more behind that picture than just standing on boxes and being able to all participate in that game with the same supports.
thank you. Anybody else? I think somebody had a comment here. Holly, I Googled it, and this was on Google definitions. People may need differing treatment to make their opportunities the same as another's. This is called equity. So different treatment. People, I think it's echoing what others are saying. So I've just been taking notes on here so that I didn't have to move the picture from you guys. So I can enter some of that in. Anybody else?
If no one else is going to comment, I have one more on my list I was going to add. Efforts to increase balanced gender representation. So I think that relates directly to our career exploration pieces. I mean, since we added STEM classes and the Project Lead the Way stuff, I've been asking, hey, are girls encouraged, to do that? Because frankly, we still keep saying things as adults like, oh, math's hard for me. Well, it isn't hard for everybody, and it opens the door to a lot of careers. So quit saying as women or girls, it's just too hard, because you can do it. So that was something else that occurred to me that's connected to our winger flight paths stuff is, especially when you read statistics out there about women shortage and not really represented in tech fields, and that's great pay. And then even Minnesota School Board's Journal had what does the picture look like for superintendents that are women in this state? And we only have 17% of our superintendents are women. So again, it was an article about, you're really not encouraged as a female to do certain things, or you're discouraged when you get there. So I think that's a whole conversation too about, and again, that's part of the old conversation for women of my generation going, where are the women in the history class, or where are the women leaders in my tiny little town? So I think that's can't be forgotten either.
Janie, I saw that you unmuted.
I did. No, thanks. I think I just was going to add, so many of us are saying the word different. And I think that's really good because something stuck with me that Heidi said actually back in June or July when we kind of had the discussion about the survey results, is that if we're truly going to make change and really talk about this in kind of growth terms and how we're going to change, is that we do have to see people as different, and we do have to have data that shows the groupings different, and that can be really hard to see and really uncomfortable. But I just remember you saying that, Heidi, and I thought that was really it's really true. And even though it's hard to see that, we do really have to be frank about where numbers are and where where test scores are and such. And so I just gonna throw that in there, is that everybody is going to get different resources and need different things. But unless we look at data and we look at some facts, we're not really going to see how we put those boxes in and where those boxes are needed. So just to kind of add to that, and obviously I want to make sure that I still think there's a lot that makes us the same, that makes us different. And I think we have to remember that too. But when we're truly talking about making academic improvements, we do have to realize that we're all very different too, and how we learn and what we have at home and what resources we have. So
I want to give space to people who haven't been able to talk yet. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I do want to give space if you would like to. All right.
I'll ask a question.
Yep.
So which one of these three should we be striving for? You can't do all three. We want to treat people equally. I think we want equity, but we also want justice. And I don't know, if you're looking through the fence, justice, you're looking through a fence. If you're the short person, you still don't have a clear view. So how does that fit in here?
I'm going to turn it back to the board on that. These pictures all have these very, there's issues with all these different images that are trying to portray equity or equality or justice, and there's a lot out there. You can dig into that. There's a lot of people who say that this is an issue in the first place, on the fact that there's a person who started off short. Right, there's a whole big discussion about why is that the case. And so I would say that what these images do, is to start this exact conversation in a group of people that are ready to make changes in their school district, which is you. And so I would say I would turn that conversation right back to the board to say, what do you all think?
Obviously, these are all simplistic images trying to express what each measure of what they're calling. I think a lot in education, it's extremely difficult to get to these points because of several issues. I think that having standards is something that negatively impacts equity, because it's standards set by a higher echelon in the state government or the federal government that's based on what? And then, we went through our lives learning from books that were issued by the Texas publishing, because Texas is one of the largest states and they have a big publishing program. And so we end up getting books that are published in Texas, and that's what we're learning from. So we're not learning Minnesota history or Illinois history or Iowa history. We're learning what people in Texas think is important. And I think one of the best, we have a fantastic teacher in our district who doesn't use textbooks. They use articles that they have researched and put out or give to the students. They don't put out the articles as far as I know, but they research what they're going to be teaching. They give it to the students, and the students learn things that they never would have learned if they were reading them in a book that was published in Texas, or probably in a book that would be possibly approved by a school board. But people learn differently. People have different inclinations for what they want to know. People have different life experiences, and their families who are raising them have different life experiences. It's we are still working on the Thomas Dewey or whoever it was who created public education, and created it in during the Industrial Revolution, and we're giving our students an industrial education rather than inspiring them to learn about the world around them and what that world has to offer. And it's, I believe it's stifling. I think it's counterproductive, and it doesn't do anybody any favors. I was talking with Carson about this in our little one-on-one meeting, and I was like, you know, to get to these things, it feels like, to me, it feels like a tsunami just washing over everything. You know, systemic racism is a thing, whether you believe it or not. It's coded into law in many places, and it's been coded into law for the last 200 years. So that gives people who are not of European descent an advantage. So it's like this tsunami that is just washing over us, and we don't have a boat to paddle. Or those people who are not of European descent don't have a boat to paddle. But then after I thought about it a couple of days later, I'm like, no, it's not that hard. It's what we need is differentiated education. And we've been talking about it since I've been on the school board. I think it's difficult to get current teachers into it because it requires a different thought process and a different preparation process. It's being taught in teaching colleges minimally, as far as I know. Last I heard about it, it was fairly minimal preparation and differentiated education. It will cost money. If you want something good, you have to spend money to make it good. And currently, the population of the United States of America, the state of Minnesota, are not willing to spend money on education. Just look at what 2% a year is what we're hoping for. That's the best we can hope for. You got to be kidding me. If you want to be Mississippi, go ahead. But that's the level that we're at. And we can do this. When I first came to Minnesota, there was the Profiles in Learning, which was a start at, as I understand it, was a start at differentiated education, making students create a portfolio of their work. It was too hard to grade, so they dumped it. And that was under Arnie Carlson, I believe, a Republican. And I mean, Minnesota used to be ambitious. Not so anymore. Not so. And education can be different. Education can change, but it can't change at the same level that it's been on for the last 12 years, 15 years. It takes a much more committed population all the way around. But I don't think it's all that hard to get there. But when I'm talking about justice being beyond our realm, it's beyond us on this school board. We will not get there because that tsunami is there, and our state, our country is not making the effort toward equity. At least we're talking about it now. But people think that equity is cheating. Equity is giving somebody something that for nothing. Well, that's anyway. I'll stop ranting. But to me, that's what it is. We need differentiated education. We need a commitment to differentiated education, and we need more money to fully achieve success in that endeavor.
I agree with you, Mike. I love the idea that, or the word you used, the differentiated education, and obviously that can be achieved easier with smaller class sizes. When I walk through our elementary buildings right now and see only 8 or 10 desks in a room that has 1 or 2 teachers in it, what a beautiful model that is. And I think that we're going to see a lot more differentiated education happening because we have smaller numbers and our teachers can actually spend some time meeting individual needs. And Holly, what I loved about the definition you Googled, it talks about differing treatment to make opportunities the same. And when you think about differing treatment, I think sometimes we get stuck on that word different. And I think it's okay to be different. And I would really love for people to embrace the differences. It's okay that you see me with brown hair. That's probably the first thing you see about me. I love my brown hair. I love it. I color it a little bit, but but I think we need to be okay with differences. And sometimes I really wonder if that's where we need to start, is learning about differences and appreciating. We don't have to love everybody. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that's totally fine. But we have to make space for me to be a part of a group, right? And so it's okay to be different. The piece that I think is that we maybe walk a fine line on is differing treatment. What does that look like? Nobody wants to be treated differently, even though we might need to be treated differently to have those same opportunities. So how can we embrace differences without being treated differently because we don't want to be treated differently? I think sometimes we get stuck in that hole maybe, and we get scared and we're not sure how to address that. Just a thought.
Maybe if treatment were understood as it tends to be, how you treat somebody. Maybe if we understood it more as a medicine, a remedy, in order to make opportunities the same. There's a lot of synonyms for treatment. And yeah, the smaller class sizes would be brilliant. Another issue with that is people aren't, as we talked about it, well, I guess Heidi brought it up, but that people aren't going into teaching. Teachers have been disrespected for decades, and it's not getting better. It's a sickness in our country, and people wonder why South Korea, or name your favorite foreign country, is doing better than we are on these test scores, which again, I don't feel test scores are an indicator of real skill or ambition or knowledge, but it's what everybody's judged on. So these countries treat their teachers with respect. They're paid if close to the amount that doctors are paid. It's respect counts for a lot, and it's not all in just the title that you give to Woody at Cheers. It's really treating people with respect, and that's not happening in education, and or it's not happening outside of education. And I'm afraid educators feel that, and it washes all over everybody who's in college looking for a career. Very few people are interested in becoming teachers, and the ones who do want to be are easily dissuaded from doing it. And again, it's not something that we can do as the District 256. The state of Minnesota could conceivably do something more about it, and the leaders of this country could do something about it. But I see no interest in doing that right now. And so we have to do what we can do in Red Wing, and if we can find a way to get differentiated education going, if it has to be with 30 students in a class, maybe we can get more, but we need more aids. We need help in grading these differentiated projects that people will be doing. It takes people to educate people, and to help people understand where they're missing the points in the knowledge that they're gaining, and to guide them into better areas, into areas where they can understand better what it is that they are interested in and going after. It would do wonders, but it takes more than 2% increases a year, just barely keeping up with inflation, not keeping up with inflation, in order to keep our district running at the level it's at. We're always at the level that we're at, and a 2% increase is losing ground, not gaining ground. That's all.
Mike, would it be fair to, as we're talking and I'm listening, would it be fair to say that one of our goals, which we are already doing, but one of the things we can do as a board is to continue lobbying the legislature and educating within our state of Minnesota? And I know we do that a lot already, but that's something that we're currently doing and we should celebrate, and we should continue. So I'm just going to write that down. Not that we have to adopt that, but I'll just put it under some things to consider as we move forward.
And I'm sure MSBA is working at that, but I don't know, they might be too practical. People tend to get practical about things, and really you need to be talking to not just our local people, because they're not in the education field. Barb used to be, but we need to get more aggressive representation. That's all I can say. I mean, you need more aggressive representation for education, to promote education, and less for other things that people think make money, but actually drain the treasury. Now, education is an investment in the future. Putting tiles on property along the Minnesota Valley is not an investment. It's a cash flow to an individual that's draining the economy and the resources of the state of Minnesota. So you need to lobby the right people, and you need the right people doing the lobbying. I don't know personally. I've been with Southeast Service Co-op, and I've experienced their lobbyists, and in fact, Roger Moe is one of their lobbyists, who just keeps, he's up there. He's a sharp guy, and it was interesting talking to him. People were in the Southeast Service, of course, we're in the in outstate, so everybody was all concerned about the outstate schools getting aid at a lower level than Twin Cities districts. And he said, you know, be careful what you ask for, because most of the money that comes to finance school districts comes from the Twin Cities. It doesn't come from the outstate districts. The roads and bridges, all that money comes, not all of it, most of that money comes from the Twin Cities, not from the outstate resources. So if the outstate people wanted to get all their money together and take care of it and exclude the Twin Cities, they would be losing. They would be losing great sums of money and revenue. It's, you know, we're a state. We're not, you know, we are in independent districts, and we are, you know, communities that do this and that, and one community does one thing better than another. But until we're all working together and realizing that the economic engine of this state is Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding communities, we're just going to be fighting over tiny pieces of corn, and it's not doing this state any favors. This division that we have, and it's and as you all know, we are not being unified in any strong fashion right now in this country.
Thanks, Mike. Jim's in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of want to go on a different tune than all about money here. I think Jess is looking for some information or the things to go forward on equity and how we can improve on it. I kind of go back to my days when I was younger. Something I always believed in. No matter what you look like, if you want to be treated, you like to be treated. You like to treat people the way you like to be treated. I watch our young people. They have very good, many of them have very good relationships with all kinds of young people. Doesn't matter what gender they are, what race they are. We can learn a lot from them as they go forward. For instance, Mike's son and my son went to school together, and there's another young man in that class that got to be good friends with my son. He was over our house, stayed overnight, went on trips with us, helped pick out our cabin. Nobody ever looked at him differently than what he was. He was different looking. We never treated him that way at all. It's really how you treat people. People want to be treated fairly and equally, and that's where you get to quality. So I think we can, as 7 white people on the board, can figure out for sure what some of these people are facing and going through. We watch it on TV. We see the frustrations that they have over that unbelievable, disgusting action of some people on others that kind of really jarred us all to finally, instead of just pretending to talk about it, actually start talking about it. And I don't think we as a school board can tackle this individually or as 7, 8, 9 people, our leadership team. It's going to take working with, I think, some of you stakeholders, community. We have the Red Wing Human Rights Commission, all these other people that are getting together and try to come up with something, because at the end of the day, we all want to be treated fairly and equal. And how we can do that is what we're trying to find out here, or get some ideas for Jess to share with others. And as I've said in a previous board meeting, every child should be treated. There should be no child treated any differently than anybody else in our school. I don't care what the reason people may think. They're all should be treated equal. And we live in the greatest country in the world. That's not quite happening all over this country, and probably not even all totally here locally. But I'm a 60-some-year-old white guy that doesn't see a lot of it, and but I'm willing to be hopefully be part of the solution and going forward for the benefit of all kids that come to Red Wing School District. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Excuse me. So kind of what I put up here is just things that I've been, as I've been listening, I've been summarizing a little bit, but it's just for you guys to react to. This isn't in stone. This is what I've heard from some of you. But now what I would love is if you kind of chimed in and said, like, this looks good to kind of move forward with the conversation, or something's missing, or I need something taken out. That's kind of what we're working off of right now. And it's right here of we believe it's okay to be different. We believe in systematic we believe systematic racism exists. We believe different students need different solutions or treatment to learn and have the same opportunities. We believe in treating others the way we want to be treated. We believe in working with many people to do this work. Is there anything that's missing or would like to be edited or taken out?
I think that's a good start. I like the working with other people to do this work, because I think we're going to need help. I think we do need to listen to others. And I think there's some training out there that would be beneficial to us, because I think you need some guidance in this work. So I'm pleased with this as a start.
I am too.
I saw Janie in the queue. I also, Pam was going to talk about, I see that Jen Grove is here. I wasn't too clear on the workshop rules, on whether she could participate in the discussion or not. Or if I wasn't too clear on that.
I would love for this to be an all-encompassing conversation. So yes, for sure.
Okay. So I saw Janie.
Yeah, and then Arlen.
Sure. So I'm going to bring up something that's very uncomfortable to say. So I hope everybody will give me pause. But I do not feel comfortable with having the systematic racism in there. I feel like it's a very big, heavy word right now that I feel like we could have a softer word that won't be as controversial, if that makes sense. And I understand what people are saying, that we have structures that are in place that have not benefited everybody. So I just throw that out there, that I feel like when we have some of these terms that are very of the day, or, you know, and I know I don't want to, I put that lightly in the aspect. I realize some people have been fighting using that word since the 50s and 40s and for 200 years. But I just want to be honest that I feel like that is a word that can make some people feel very uncomfortable. And I know that I feel uncomfortable having it up there, because I don't necessarily agree that every structure that we have in place is racist.
Do you have another word, Janie?
Well, as I talk through that, I just feel, you know, we have structures in place. You know, I don't know a word or a term right now. So as I talked it out, I don't know if another phrase comes up for other people, but I'm uncomfortable with that one.
Structural racism, yeah. It's a loaded word, because people are using words in very incorrect fashion these days. So, but it's baked in. It's baked in, and it takes a lot to overcome it. You know, from slavery to Jim Crow to lynching to redlining. To separate but equal. It's people, our nation has grown up under these laws. They're baked into the system. They seem okay to us. When you know, I was watching something and they said that you know what, the grandfather clause, that was created in the South so that they could have laws grandfathered in, or actions grandfathered in, that wouldn't apply to new people or
Mike,
to black.
If I can interrupt you just really quickly, I'm not saying that laws were good or positive or anything. I'm more focused on that the term systematic racism is going to turn some people off.
How
And
about
so-
systemic discrimination? Is that better?
Well, can we just say we believe racism exists?
Well, since people are offended by racism, I think maybe what did I just say?
What about even just
Discrimination.
believe that
Discrimination would be a better word.
I couldn't hear you, Jeannie.
I just throw this out there for discussion, but we believe bias exists.
What if we added on, we believe structural systemic racism exists in different, in different degrees? Because some of us believe that it really exists and it is the premise for what's going on in the country, but some people don't believe that. So we agree to some degree that it exists, but some people don't believe that it's impacting as much as it does. And some of us believe it's the underlying impact of everything. So can we say and in different degrees or and in different ways, or we don't all agree per se, but I think it's more than bias. I think it's structural and it's built in. So, but I understand what you're saying, Janie. You don't believe that, and that's okay. That's where you and I are at. But I don't want to discount it, and I don't want to say you agree with it.
Right. Well, and that's why I know it's really hard to come to words that we're all going to agree with, but I just wanted to bring it up because I know people in our community are going to feel the same way too. So this isn't about me, but I also just want to make sure we're thinking about when this represents us as a school board and as a community, how does that look? And I just think we should be very, wary of kind of these words that are very
Accurate.
Of the day, right? I don't know what the right term is, but there obviously we're all aware that there's terms that are very inflammatory or controversial right now.
Do you feel comfortable? Sorry,
I think it's racism that's the issue. I think discrimination is more encompassing, so maybe that's a better word. Ideas, opinions.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from other people that haven't shared. This isn't about me out at all. So, and I appreciate Holly, because I appreciate you being, I think it is a compromise, and I think that's why this is uncomfortable, and we have to talk it out and work it out. So.
Is there any way that we can leave this here for a second and I can share a little bit more about what other districts have done, and then kind of bring it back at the end, knowing that this is a piece that needs more discussion? Jeannie, do you see that?
Oh yeah, I think that's great. As long as this is a working thing and hey, I love that we're just talking this out, but words are important. So when this comes down to, final, I just think we need to be cognizant of that. So.
Absolutely. And I think that's going back to our norms where we say expect and accept non-closure. We are not going to solve this tonight. But starting the discussion of this is where we're at right now, I think is really fair. I think you guys have a lot that you've started. And I think it's a good footing to kind of move forward to hear what people have had to say about it. Is that fair for everybody? We kind of move on a little bit.
Well, we have Arlen is still in the queue,
I'm sorry.
and Holly, I don't know if you wanted to share more or had more thoughts, but let's give Arlen, Holly a minute too.
Thank you. I guess that means it's my turn. First off, are we only working in this writing in regards to students, or are we going to address it as staff also? Secondly, somewhere, and this maybe isn't the right place, the big thing is we need to have a conversation where we listen to the people that feel there are issues with how or what is going on in our district. Thirdly, going down to the structural, systemic racism, discrimination exists in different degrees. If we feel we want to make that statement, where is that? Are we saying in the country, in the state, in our city, in our school, in a particular area of our school, only with children? It should be defined where, if we're going to make that statement. And I'm not entirely sure. I guess I probably need to look up what is the definition of systemic racism. I believe that we have different standards for different people, and I do believe we need to treat people the way we want to be treated. We should be treating people. Well, going back to our first slide, do we want to do? Treat people equally? Do we want to use equity, or do we want to use justice, or what is the answer? We need to address a problem that's going on in our country, in our city, in our school. I believe we have issues, but I still don't know how to identify it. I'm still struggling. But the minute we have an issue with a group of people or a group of a certain nationality, whatever it may be, the first step is to listen and find out what the issue is. So I'm still here learning. I'm trying to understand. I want everybody to be treated fairly in the end. I want everything to work to everybody's best abilities. And sometimes what we look at stuff to be maybe isn't what the individual or the group wants in the end. I'm sure if we look, there'll be maybe not as many people go to college from certain groups. But is it because of what we're doing, or is it because they don't want to go there? Maybe certain groups tend to be more vocationally orientated, carpentry, our trades and different things like that. And sometimes we may use those tools or information to say, well, this group is doing this because they aren't treated fairly. But is that what they want? And I don't like the word they. That's our decision. But we got to be careful sometimes trying to define that it's not fair to somebody because they didn't do this, but maybe they didn't want to do it in the first place. And I guess I've gone on long enough. Thank you.
Jen, did you want to say something before we moved on? I don't want to put you on the spot, but.
I probably don't have too much important to say with this topic. I think this is something for the board to kind of wrestle with and argue with. I do know where I stand, and as a former special education teacher and having to work to make sure that things are individualized so kids meet goals, I probably look at things a little bit differently. Because I do see measures of success maybe a little bit differently. And I just hope that we're, as we're thinking about the students that we have in the building, the students that we see come into the building every day, and we know how their days are going, and whether they're successful or not, just keeping those little people in mind as the humans that they are. And I was asked a question once I was asked a race question when it came time for my interview for the position. And I really feel like one of the most important things that I can do is make sure that I am treating and working with the individuals that I come into contact with as human beings that have their own concerns and they have their own needs. And it's really important that when those kids come into my building that I help to meet those needs, whatever those are. Excuse me with the cold.
Thanks, Jen.
Arlen asked about what we should, how broad our focus should be. We need to focus on just the district. I think that's all we can do. And the systemic discrimination, while it may not seem like it's here, just the fact that it's been in existence so long, it's baked into the way that we look at other people. And so if we stay confined inside our district, I think we'll be much better off.
And I don't mean to segue us, but of course, I kind of will. But, you know, and Mike, I think that comes from, you know, just my own personality as someone that I would rather have us look forward of like what we're going to do and what goals and what changes we're going to make in this district. And I think that's why, you know, this wording is extremely important, and I know it is, but like I'm really looking forward to being like, okay, well, what are we specifically going to do, and what do our parents and students specifically need, and what are the indicators and what are the goals that we're going to choose as a board with the staff, you know, improvement. So I guess that's where I want to make sure we put most of our time and energy toward, because we can make some huge changes, and we've done that in other areas, and I know we can. I just think that's why sometimes we can get bogged down with words. But I'm really looking forward to where our action steps are going to be. I think that's the most important thing, looking forward. So,
and I'm going to jump in on that with Janie, what you said, that some community members may be offended that that wording is in there, just like many community members will be offended if it's not. You know, that may not be speaking their voice. And to the point that Ms. Grove just made about how do we see all kids and treat all kids as humans, regardless of their differences, with their differences. So when we look at, is it just race we want to define, or is it sexual orientation? Is it, you know, male, female? Is it economics? Is it disabled? You know, all of those are part of the equity piece. So like you said, not get bogged down on something, but in a lot of ways, in order to address it and change it, we have to name it. So by naming it, it is what it is. People do feel that way, that there is systemic racism in our education system, even as we speak. If a person of color says that, it's not for me to say it's not there.
Right, and I think that's why as we talk things out, we can come to even better words that can encompass all and everyone. And again, I'm not looking here to argue it. I just think as we talk it out, there's great words that we can use, and that's what's important about this exercise, is that, you know, maybe we can come to a more encompassing vision of all and every human and all things. So, and I'll leave it at that.
And until you identify your problems, you can't know what they are and move forward. So understanding that what the problems are is essential to getting the right fixes in, Janie. So that's the 12th step, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys don't mind, I wanted to share a little bit of, I did have the data equity dashboard from St. Peter. Heidi, if you have that, it'd be great to see it. I couldn't find it on their website. But I know there are a couple other things that you shared. You did share Rochester's equity statement, and I've been talking to a variety of districts to talk about what do they do and their equity work. I've been talking with Faribault, and they've been going through an equity institute for the past 3 years that they've been talking about that has changed a lot of what they've done in their district. And had these conversations at this level as well. So I just want to show you guys, like, this is the kind of work that their district and their school board has done. So they have come up with, like, here's the Rochester equity statement, and I will not read the whole thing to you, but I can send it out. It is long. It does call out a lot of what you guys have been talking about, and they just post that right on their website to say this is the work that they're doing, and I can send that out to you later. And it just really calls to attention kind of all of their action steps that they're willing to take, so that it's very blatant to the community. This is what we are going to work on as a school district in order to improve learning and teaching for our students. So they do call out, they do use the I don't know, the language that we've all been talking about here. They go way into not just racial equity, but they do go into everything else that we've also been talking about with gender and sexuality as well. So I think that that's something to think about. That's something that the board level has put out to the community to say, like, this is how we would go forward. That data dashboard is another way to do it. Faribault also has like a district equity team and site teams. They also have a RISE program that they modeled after Northfield's Torch program that are for their students to really utilize the resources within and have advocates within the school district for their kids. So the other thing that we want to think about, and I think you guys all have touched on this, the fact that there are major equity issues, not just racial equity, but equity and excellence in education, financial equity, gender equity, and then the digital divide that we have seen across the country based on COVID happening to us very quickly. So all of these are things that we are consistently working with through our technology department, and then also gender equality and financial, or gender equity and financial equity is also worked through kind of what we did last year, and thinking about the social emotional training that we had our teachers go through, and also at the district level to think about that. So last year would have been year one in what we're talking about, and when utilizing Castle's website, which is like very research based on social emotional learning, they intertwine social emotional learning and equity together. They say, like, you can't do that work without the other, because it's wrapped up in treating others the way that you want to be treated. So in thinking about, so what I wanted to just kind of highlight, I again won't read all of this to you, but when you look at, these are some of the things that we started with in year one, I would consider this year, year two. And then what we're looking from you, from the district advisory committee, from the district equity team, from the Human Rights Commission, is that feedback on what's next for years 3, 4, and 5. So when you're looking at these things, this is a proposal of what we would bring to our district equity team. So this was just was last year. So I'm going to give this to you guys a little bit. We had implemented the district wellness team to talk about how is our staff doing. We talked about implementing the reset reflect room. We have the PBIS model to continuously talk about the structures that we implement for our kids. Then we also had an administrative team meeting about behavioral incidents data to say, how are we reworking definitions to have it be fair and equitable for all of our students in regards to what is considered a discipline referral or behavior, and are we doing that across the board in a way that makes sure that we're serving our students and making sure that learning's at the center of what we're doing at our school buildings. So that's one thing that the admin team worked through, and then we did the increased mental health support for students, counselors, social workers, and then consistent MTSS practices. We had district-wide social emotional development training, and then expanding our professional development for ACEs training, trauma-informed de-escalation, and behavior tools. We also implemented with the school board's approval, Wonders 2020, which incorporates what we're talking about here with equitable access across our grade levels to align our curriculum, and also to think about culturally relevant texts and authentic text throughout that curriculum. So those are some things we did last year to kind of set up to go forward for this year. Questions about last year?
Jess, can you remind me what ACEs are or means? Isn't it a phrase defining individuals, or is this something different?
Defining individuals, sorry?
What is ACEs on the?
Yeah.
I appreciate you not using acronyms on the other things.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. The adverse childhood experiences.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's right. Thanks.
Yep, to talk about how that intersects with student learning. Youth Outreach did a great training for some community members, and some of our staff members were a part of that. And then in talking, Tower View has done some trainings for some staff members as well, because they've been through a lot of ACEs training, adverse childhood experiences. I can send something out to you guys as well on that.
And those kind of cases are where treating people equally doesn't necessarily work, because you need to approach them where they're coming from, ideally, which is extremely difficult. But for those who wonder the difference between equality and equity, that would be a part of it, where you're trying to deal with people who you can't really understand.
Jess, I have a question. In anywhere in this work, and excuse me if I missed it, but did you have a discussion about grading practices? Are we, auditing ourselves about what that looks like when it comes to equity? I mean, like one example would be, kid asks a teacher for extra credit, and he goes, sure, you can stay after and clean the lab. Well, that offer wasn't made to all children in the classroom. I'm not sure cleaning the lab, unless you're going to go over, is that a standard that you know how to clean the lab as part of a science class? Maybe it is. I don't know. And then if you're staying after, you need transportation home, which Pam brought up earlier, like how do you access this if you don't have a car, or a spare parent with a car, or a parent with a work schedule that supports this stuff? So are those kinds of discussions happening, or is that work that's coming ahead?
Those discussions have happened. I would say that it's on when we made the 5-year plan as a district-wide, those were discussions at the administrative level to say when is the best time to do that. I know there are some small changes being made to grading practices at Twin Bluff and then at the high school, kind of making our way towards that standards-based discussion, and also towards the 15 fixes of grading of what does homework mean, and how do you utilize that, and is learning at the center of grading as well. Those conversations are there. It's just whether the administrative team, when we felt that was the best time to implement that. So yes, the easy answer is yes, those discussions are happening. As far as timing on it, I don't have an exact timeline for you.
Pleased to hear that they're happening, because I have multiple examples, and it's like people are like, oh, isn't that great? And I'm like, no, not really. That you have been offered this extra opportunity to earn points, and I'm like, no, that's not it. So again, it's just a mindset of like how do we look at this that says equal access, or equitable access to opportunity. Have you had a discussion? So somebody, I can't remember where I came across this recently. So I've been using the term achievement gap, or sometimes they've said opportunity gap, but somebody kind of pushed back on that too. So it kind of opened up my brain a little bit about, well, when you say achievement gap, you're usually saying, well, whites are here and the others that you're talking about are here. So you're measuring against whites. And it's like, well, boy, that's a little uncomfortable too. And I thought, oh, I appreciate that. I mean, you're saying if these folks could do as good as the white folks, it's like, well, is that a limitation of aspirations? I mean, you've set your measuring bar as the white standard. And I'm like, oh, yep, makes sense when you're describing it from your perspective. So any way that you could help the board kind of learn, we've had a lot of discussion about words, and I think words are powerful and have impact. So and I've made a point to be adjustable and flexible so that my language reflects my learning about there's a better way to say this, or you shouldn't have said that at all. It's really this. So if you could help us learn that language about, or at least what the discussions are about there, I think that would be really helpful for us to connect to other communities that we're not connecting with.
So I think what you're talking about possibly is deficit thinking.
Yeah.
And that's something that's basically what different equity trainings are bringing in now is how do we reframe how we talk about how we're doing things so that we are reframing that for not only our community as a whole, so that deficit thinking doesn't permeate beyond our school walls as well. And probably what people were referring to too, when I know there was discussion about the data and how does that color a lens of what we're doing in the school district for it without having a solution first, presenting data without a solution. There's conversations about that happening as well. So I think that that's definitely something that is being addressed in what we're doing this year for our administrative team. I'll have to write down as far as what we would do for the school board though.
Okay, great. No, thank you.
Janie, I think I saw you.
Thank you, Jess. I just want to bring up when I see our Wonders 2020 curriculum on the bottom of this, when I'm sure many of us watched the Human Rights Commission video, and I was just throwing this out there of, have you thought, Jess, or whether it's teachers or administrators, of trying to kind of do a video or some kind of informational about our curriculum and the efforts that we have in our district ongoing of trying to have a very multicultural, focus on making sure our books and our academics are, very encompassing of all things. And I'm not using the hot topic words of today, but I know when you gave us our great presentation of why we should, recommend the Wonders and approve the curriculum, it was very much because of some of the main things that some of the people in the community have been talking about. And I kind of was surprised that, maybe some of our community members haven't seen that yet or aren't aware of some of the things that we already do in our school district. So I just wanted to make sure that was brought up, because that's kind of how I feel, is that we did pick that curriculum because it was so much better and had lots of new things. So
yeah, I think that's a good point. I think though, where those community members are pushing us, which I think is a good thing, where our community always pushes us to hopefully to progress, is probably talking now about our 7-12 curriculum, and moving towards now what does that look like in order to support what we maybe put in place there now to support that continuum for our students, because I know a lot of community members that have talked about that have students in the high school, and so that's probably their lens on what they might be talking about.
Yeah, and that's true. And I guess again, I would throw back out there that I think our kids are learning some things that maybe our team members aren't aware of, and whether it be, when Todd Herber and Sheena brought kids up for the Martin Luther King Festival, that time, I think we just need to almost have like some examples of what the positive things we are doing. And it doesn't mean that we can't do more and have more focus, but I am proud of a lot of the things we've been doing. And again, there is room for improvement, but that curriculum thing stuck out on me. And then I don't mean to push, but are we going to see any data tonight specifically on kind of our academics or discussion about kind of some of the biracial discussions about how we could do better in our district too? I don't mean to throw us back to kind of the race issues, but I guess that's what, I don't know. Is that going to come, or is that going to be maybe another time?
So as far as the academic data, I don't have that for today, but we do have access to that. As far as solutions to moving forward, that's what this year 2 is here. And our next slide is talking about what we'll do this in year 2 surrounding equity. This is, to be fair, this is a focus on racial equity. And I heard Heidi say like this should be encompassing all. I think that when we look though at what the training and the institute that we're thinking about as far as racial equity training, part of what you in talking to the people that would put that on, they said part of what you learn is to how to interact and how to use those tools in all different situations. So you're training into a mindset of learning and a mindset of growth in talking about this and having this conversation. So I would say, as always, this is kind of this jumping off point. One of the things that we jumped off with this year is the perspectives course in 8th grade to really integrate students, 8th grade students, to try to talk about their own lived experiences with also these English language arts standards and social studies standards kind of combined to talk about speaking, listening skills through also understanding and humanizing the person that you might disagree with. And so that's really the skills that these 8th grade students are getting through this conversation. And what they also have gotten is Wing Huey came and did this professional development with our staff, but then he has done 5 lessons with our students to talk about how does our perspective shape the world. And kind of what they do is they talk about their own inner feelings about who they are, and they write that on a chalkboard, and then they take a picture and they show that to their fellow students to show, like, this is something you don't know about me just by looking at me. And so then they humanize each other to then have conversations where when you disagree with someone and they've been humanized, now we have a better conversation because you respect them as a person before you disagree with them. So it's just kind of also integrating those social emotional skills and then also equity into our classroom with it being experiential. So then what we would like to do also is to create this district-wide equity team. So part of the people that have been a part of brainstorming for this perspectives course happened and Heidi, you correct me if I'm wrong, Heidi was a part of our team. But started in July, where we started talking about what could this perspectives course look like, and we brought in a lot of community members and students and parents to talk about what should this course look like and how could it be best suited to do what we would like it to do in Red Wing. Off of that team, we would ask a lot of those team members to be part of our equity, district-wide equity team, in order to say, okay, the perspectives course was kind of our jumping off point. What's next for us? In partnership, as you can see, with the school board, the curriculum and instruction committee, the district advisory committee, the human rights committee, or commission, and then students and family. And how do we build that plan to go forward and have those next steps as a community in this discussion about equity. I know that you guys also discussed wanting to conduct an in-depth review of board policy. One of the tools that we've been learning about, I know that the city of Red Wing uses something called the HEAP sheet. That's basically just 6 questions that kind of keep equity in mind when you're talking about policies and procedures. What's nice about it is that it is really user friendly, and there really isn't a lot of training that you need in order to be able to use it. You can go through and ask these questions of yourself. I talked to Michelle Lizzie about how they're kind of utilizing it at the city level, and she said that they use it at the committee level. They've also used it when different employees are writing different plans for the city. And also there's another one that Louisville uses. It's called REAP, which is a racial equity analysis protocol. It's very similar actually to the one that the city is using, but I can share both of those with you all. That will be something that we would be able to use starting this year in talking about policy and procedure, and you all could utilize it as well if you had interest. There are a couple of things on there that we didn't address. The admin and the school board, as you all know, are reading and having a book study on white fragility. That will be throughout the year to kind of start that conversation and have hard conversations about where we're going with this. It's not to say white fragility is the only book you should be reading. It's just again, kind of like those images that we had in the beginning. It's a jumping off point to have conversations about equity within our district. So those are some of the things that we're starting right away. The other thing is I talked to Faribault about, Holly, do you want to ask a question? Because I was going to jump into staff development. So
Yeah, thank you. How did you pick white fragility?
So we had 4 top, we asked if anybody had interest in putting one out as an admin team. And there were 4 or 5 that were brought up as possibilities during an admin team meeting. And then, Jen, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think then we kind of just voted on this is the one that we feel like should start the conversation. And other people were like, I've read these 3 and these 2, but this is the one that I think could be good going forward for us. Jen, is that fair? You correct me.
That makes sense. I was just curious.
Okay. Did you want to say something, Jen? No. Okay. So as we keep going now in talking about what's next now for our admin team, what I've been talking to some of the people in the teaching and learning department in Faribault, and they suggested this racial equity training through 2 consultants. One is Melissa and the other one is Candace. I can send you guys some information on them. Candace was a superintendent of Austin Public Schools, and Melissa was the Karsten, can you help me with last names? And Melissa was the superintendent of Edina Public School, Eden Prairie Public.
Yeah, it's Melissa Krull from Eden Prairie, and then Candace Roskins from Austin, previous
Thank
superintendents in those 2 places.
Thank you. And they, I talked to them based on the experience that Faribault has had. They are 3 years into this program, and they have talked about it as, he said I could quote, Joe Sage said I could quote him as, it's the best professional development money we've ever spent. And what he said was that it didn't give us something that sometimes professional development has been, you just do a one and done, and then you never come back to it. He said this is about development. It truly is about development of a staff and making sure we have consistent vocabulary and making sure we have the tools to bring back to our staff, and making sure that as we go through that we really have these hard conversations in order to make these decisions as far as grading practices. And that's what they would say, Heidi, is like we go through this about mindset, and then when we go back to our buildings we make decisions that are based in equity. And so there are 2 things there from those 2 is the Institute for Courageous School and District Leadership, and then the admin racial equity training. The year-long would start in October, and it would be about 2-hour sessions each month or every other month, depending on how we do that. And then it would be about different things, about talking about what is race like in my life, talking about implicit bias, talking about, they're going to lead us through something on white fragility. So it intertwines, they built something for us to intertwine what we're already doing in the district. And then the second thing would be an institute where you send 1, 2, or 3 people through these institutes to bring back that leadership. It's kind of like a train the trainer model where you go through with other districts so that you have more perspective on what others are doing and you learn from one another in order to go forward together and maybe grow as that state, right, Mike? And really want to go forward and make those changes together. Questions on that? I have one more about what we would be doing this year. One more slide.
We haven't gotten that white fragility book yet, have we?
There's one here for you. I think there's a few people who haven't picked it up yet, but there's still time.
Okay. All right.
Yep, they're sitting in here for you. Lisa has them. And then, so what we have here too is I know that the board and Karsten has expressed interest in hiring practices and reviewing what we would be doing with that. And then the whole purpose of going through this training would be to have a equity and inclusion plan when we were done with the training. So what we would do throughout the year is have those discussions, be editing it, revising it, along with having input from all of you, having input from our district advisory committee throughout the year, from our curriculum and instruction team, so that we really bring parents, students, staff members, all of those perspectives into what we can be doing going forward. So this is just kind of like a framework of, these are the steps that we're taking in order to have a very all-encompassing equity and inclusion plan that meets everybody's needs. And then this is why.
Sorry to interrupt you. What efforts or conversations have happened to try to include some more people that of different races and such that we just don't normally have involved in our district as far as parents and such? Because I just feel like whether it was parent committees or, you know, just the district advisor in general, it's hard to get people that aren't normally, you know, active. So what efforts can we take, or have you had much discussion around that of trying to get some new people and new perspectives?
Yeah, so I think that the perspectives class was a really awesome jumping off point for that, because it was something that that people were asking to engage in and also have been asking for a while. So I think that that was a group where I felt like it was nice to have, there were a couple of people who came on that said, oh, I thought it was going to be all the people I already knew, and it's different people. So I think that was good feedback. The other thing that people have said is that these virtual meetings actually make it easier for people to participate that couldn't before, because of maybe having kids in bed or having to transport kids here and there, or being able to do it on a break from work. That they said that participating in the perspectives course brainstorming was helpful to have it be virtual. So that's one thing. We asked, like, why did you like, I asked some of the students, we had students that had graduated to come back, and she was there at, I don't know, she was there at a restaurant just with her earbuds in, and said, like, I just wanted to be part of this. And so we asked why now, and she said, I'm ready to be part of this this exciting conversation for Red Wing. And so I think that maybe that was one thing that was really helpful. We also have been inviting we'll be personally inviting students. We are also letting them know what they're in for before they sign up. So we are looking for students who would like to have their voices heard and are able to have that conversation with adults. I think one of the students, the 9th grader that was a part of the perspectives course brainstorming, was better at talking about equity and her experience than any of the adults in the room. She was quite impressive. So I think tapping the people who want to be a part of it is a long process, but it's been worth it. I don't know. We've been brainstorming. I don't know if you guys can see that, but this is the list of brainstorming all the people. So we're not tapping the same people over and over again. We're also being careful about doing that with our teachers. We tap the same teachers over and over again. So that's something definitely on our radar as far as making sure that nobody's sitting on more than one committee. I think Jen Grove is sitting on 2. But other than that, I think it's just also making sure that your meetings are run really smoothly, and that people know what they're getting into when they come. I think is helpful as far as making sure that we have people come back.
Say, Jess, do you mind if I jump in and just point out the last item on that page?
Yep.
I know the Human Rights Commission and the City of Red Wing have done a lot of work as well in terms of equity planning, and we want to partner with them. In particular, they've been working with a gentleman named Thomas Harris, who is also an expert in this area. And so we don't have a defined agreement with him or the specific plan. But I know, I think he comes out of University of Wisconsin, La Crosse, and I've seen him work with or present information at the Human Rights Commission, and just has a great approach as far as working with people to hear their stories, and help find solutions. So anyway, that's also going to be likely part of the mix as well. You're on mute there, Jess.
Something I wanted to add to my MSBA update from yesterday. The League of Minnesota Counties, League of Minnesota Cities, the Association of Minnesota Counties, and the Chamber of Commerce and MSBA are working together on programming regarding racial equity. So there might be other opportunities coming forward. So that's a more collaborative work if you just want to keep your pulse on that. And then I hope I can take some credit for this as I'm leaving the MSBA board, but one of the things that we discussed a couple of years ago for our strategic plan was diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI work for short. So it's one of it's like our top priority, that your new board members should be going through phase 1 training, which is mandated by the state. And there's equity training now included in that. And of course, it's an intense training. It's one day and they have a lot to cover. So I'm not saying I don't know how big of a piece it is, but at least it's progress toward recognizing that probably every district in Minnesota has equity issues. If you're not experiencing racial equity issues, you're probably experiencing socioeconomic equity issues and gender issues and stuff like that. So I know there's a lot of opportunities, and I'm really, really happy to see all the stuff we're doing here. I mean, it's tremendous work. So thank you. What I've learned so far, I'm just really, really pleased.
Thank you. Sorry, I was talking to myself before, but I just wanted these next 3 years. The only thing that we have on here is the Institute for Courageous School and District Leadership. Is just because you continuously add more administrators and then also lead teachers so that you're permeating into your school district. But the reason that we're leaving it open here is to make sure that we have room for the initiatives that come through the planning that we do throughout this year. And then also leaving it open for what you would want to do as a school board. So I do have I am at our last question. That would be like, what actions would you like the board to take in the next 3 years regarding equity? So I don't know if we want to open that up. I have heard things like lobbying for this, the state for funding, grading policies, and then I just heard Heidi's the school board training from the MSBA.
I'm not in the queue. I don't know if I'm up or not.
Go ahead,
Jess,
Jim.
can I answer? Thank you. This brings up an interesting question here, that kind of more about really what the board wants to do. And I apologize, there's a lot of stuff going on here tonight. I may have missed this. Has our administrating team discussed the same question? And if we have information on what they discuss, will help us look at what we want to discuss too, because we want to try to be aligned together. And instead of us telling everybody what to do, it's nice to hear from people that are on the forefront, what they're seeing, what they would like to see, whether it's discussion, implementation, long-range planning. You know, there's a lot of different things you can do that. But I think it's something that would benefit this board if that information was shared, as our information will be shared with them. So, thank you.
I think I saw Holly. Jim, is it fair to say get information and recommendations from the admin team for your steps?
Yeah, I get information, recommendation, and
Collaboration.
collaboration, what they're kind of, you know, what steps do they see year 1, 2, and 3 that are beneficial for this district? Now, that may not be the correct terminology, but, you know, instead of getting information or recommendations, you know, are those recommendations, are they immediate? Are they 6 months, 2 years, you know, 5 years? I know we have a 3-year time frame here, but sometimes things need longer to digest and get there, and when some needs to be done sooner. So that's a start. If anybody else can add anything else there, it'd be fine. So thank you.
That's a good start, Jim. I was just going to add, after reading Rochester's statement, I'm quite envious of where they're at with that, and I'm very impressed, and I'm glad that you brought it to us, Jess. So I would like to see us adopt something like that, adopt quicker rather than later, because I know sometimes we can be on committees for years trying to come up with a mission statement. Much like Janie said, verbiage, we can't agree on one word or simple things like that, but just to take a quicker approach into adopting something like that. So, yeah.
Thank you. So drafting an equity statement. Okay.
That was on my list too, Holly. I think it shows commitment from a district level, from every corner of our district. So I really liked that too. Thanks, Jess. You were in the queue too, I think.
Yeah, I agree with the last two board members. I think there should be some alignment or collaboration with, you know, and I've been asking for this for a while about, well, if the administrative folks have some access to a speaker or resources, can we package that up in a way that makes sense to the board? Because maybe we can't do, you know, an 8-hour workshop or whatever, but how do we get access to that kind of training too? And I realize that maybe we all need to struggle with this a little bit, and sometimes it isn't appropriate to have staff in board in this room at the same time, because it's just makes it tougher for some folks, and we need a little, you know, space to kind of breathe in this conversation. So I agree in that, you know, if you guys tap into something that makes sense, is there a smaller package to box it up in for a, you know, board consumption, or a 45-minute presentation, you know, during even a regular board meeting that makes sense. So I think that's just a good practical step, and it makes sense if the administrative team and the board team are working in alignment. And I really, I did have a conversation with a Rochester board member recently, and that's why she's like, oh, we've got this great equity statement. I'm going, well, hey, you know, it's good. That's what we're looking for. So I agree with you, Holly, about making, trying to get there, making that statement that it really does make a difference, I think. And that I'm just, again, really excited that the district is doing this work. Next steps. I think we need to, well, the grading policies have been on my mind for a while too, because I think we really need to look at that, because that's impacting kids and families on a day-to-day basis in some respects. And we need to have everybody's mind kind of like, oh, that's not an equitable practice though. And it touches on anything, you know, participation in class, opportunities to learn. I went to an MSBA workshop, and this was a long time ago, but about, you know, we have kids who were working frontline jobs in the middle of COVID, and then they had to do school too. And I'm not sure we're recognizing all those different types of family situations. Or one of the examples that I learned in the workshop was, you know, this kid is falling asleep at his desk in class. And of course, we don't want that. But then his story is, I'm one of the wage earners for the family. So I am showing up to school, but then I actually can't stay awake because I'm working 8 hours on an overnight shift to try to support my family. So how are we being flexible enough in our policies and our grading practices that allow this kid to catch up on his own time? And we're going to support that because he is showing up and he wants to do the right thing. but he's carrying a lot on his shoulders. And he's actually a school leader, although he doesn't perform well in class. So, I mean, that's the texture, I think, of family life and family situations that we need to think about, that not everybody goes home to a parent who understands language. I had 2 horrible junior high science teachers, and I'm a fantastic learner, top of the food chain, and I couldn't learn from these people. But I had a dad who could teach me all about simple machines at the kitchen table, because that was his knowledge. I don't know how other children survived that class, because we were all struggling. But I had a guy who was great with tools and mechanics, and he knew exactly how to tell me what it was. So I'm just looking for a really broad context of what is our student experience. And it just doesn't fit the mold that I think most of us at this table have experienced in our lives. So I'm really passionate about how are we handling the student experience, and are we providing the structure that works for a variety of student life. I probably used way too many words, but you can tell it's meaningful to me. And I think I'll leave it at that. I think we're going to have some more conversation on this, and I'll probably percolate with some other ideas. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. So do we want to brainstorm anything else? And I know that Pam, you had stated that you wanted to maybe keep it into 1 to 3. So maybe something that the board would want to focus on first, or what would you like to do?
Well, I think if we have too many, we're going to not do any one well. I think we also need to think about action steps for, like draft an equity statement. Great. What does that mean? How are we going to get it done? Who's going to write it? Those kinds of things. But we've got Arlen, Jeannie, and Jim in the queue, so let's hear from them and see where we go after that.
Thank you. I don't know quite the right verbiage, but I would like to identify, I don't know what the right wording is. We seem to be unable to bring in people of different, diverse races and lifestyles. So I'm going to take a stab at this way. Identify barriers that keep us from hiring diverse employees. How's that for wording?
Great. You did my work for me.
Thank you. Or could I add and take action to address those barriers?
Right. Who was next? Sorry.
I think it might be me, but Pam, if I can throw out there too, I've learned many of us have worked with great group organizers and collaborators over the years, some in this group that, I throw out there that maybe we just brainstorm a bunch of next steps, and then as a board we get to vote or somehow, come up with the 1 or 2 or 3 that the most of us want to work on. I just throw that out there as an idea for the future. But I guess I wanted to go back to kind of some action steps. Many of you know that I was involved with one of the joint groups and worked on the summer blast, ideas. And I just want to bring that results-based accountability stuff into this, because I think that we could find some things, and this is part of the admin collaboration, but what are some specific things that we need to work on that we see some huge disparities in, whether it be the reading scores, whether it be attendance, whether it be math scores, or whether it be AP, kids registering into AP classes. But I just want to come up with some very specific action items that we can then work with our teachers and staff on to think about indicators and some of the ideas of why that is happening. And again, you know, we've done this in the community where we knew that we had a pocket of kids that weren't doing well in reading, and we specifically came up with a program and specifically worked to help that. And we had 2 summers in a row that we raised up reading scores specifically for a disadvantaged socioeconomic group. And I just bring that up that it can be done. And so I just want to make sure that we, you know, are asking our staff and admin to come up with some of these, you know, stats or, you know, figures that just aren't looking good for our specific Red Wing. And then let's try to figure out a way to make those better.
Janie, is it fair to say the outcome database solutions?
Yes, Jess, I think that is very fair.
Okay. I think Jim
Jim,
went next.
you're up in the queue.
Thank you. I kind of like to see us get a reasonable number of steps, because I still want to hear from what the admin team is doing. And then also they may have some we hadn't thought of, and now we have 6 or 8. And so I think if we can identify, if you want to stay in that 3 or 4 range, I move my hands around all the time. How are they? Can you see them? And my wife tells me that all the time. And but I think 3 to 4, and then maybe some are duplicate, may not, and then we can take what that admin team does and see if they fit to what we believe in. And they may hear ours and may think they fit to what they believe in. So that's just my take.
I'd make a proposal that Karsten maybe brings all of them back to the admin team, and then we can kind of look through those, and then we can come up with 3 or 4 together. So based on your guys' list, then we could bring that back to the admin team, and they could give some feedback on it and see where we align and where there needs to be some discussion. If you all would be open to that.
I think that makes sense. And also, I think we'll find that a lot of these things fold into each other, so that it's not nearly as many as the points on the left-hand side. Looking into flexibility in learning and grading policies, that would be, to me, that would be differentiated education. And then the grading policies, what I've been hoping for a long time is to stop passing students through grades and actually make sure that they learn something before they move on to the next level. And that would have to do with grading policies and advancement. And the outcome and data-based solutions, it's good to set a target, but we need to find out where these kids are at first. And I think the differentiated learning would help in that, and the meeting the kids where they're at, rather than setting some kind of goal that some kids can achieve and some can't. But it's a good start, and I don't think it'll take it 3 years to draft an equity statement, so that one should go pretty quickly. And that should be the board doing that, right, and not the administration, or I suppose it would help to have somebody with some skills to do that. But I think we'll find that a lot of this stuff folds into it, and it's just addressing the issues and focusing on it. Like, I'll just come back again to differentiated learning, differentiated education. They're not my words. It's an actual method of teaching. It actually exists out in the world, and it's known. So maybe we should lobby the legislature to put more money toward that, and toward putting that into the teaching schools in Minnesota, because my understanding is that it's not being taught like it should. We're still stuck in the factory model of education. And And again, everything will, reviewing the student experience, that should be ongoing. That should be happening every year. Anyway, but it's good to be doing this. And nice spell check. And so it's a great start, and as long as it's continued, it will be successful. The problem in education is always continuing and keeping moving forward. So oftentimes we get pulled back after one thing or another, reacting rather than acting, blah, blah, blah. So this is great, though. This has been it's been a good meeting. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anybody else before, and then the action would be to bring these back to the admin team and then update you all next time, right, Karsten?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the consensus. I would like to know how we would work with the equity team, the district-wide equity team in this process, because I feel like we're leaving that group out of the decision-making process with this.
Can we add to get information, recommendations, and collaboration from the admin and equity team? Would everybody be okay if we added that in there?
That would be the place to put it.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, it would be nice to hear from them.
And then also, and it's something we won't have to decide right now, but, we could certainly focus on equity issues at most of our workshops moving forward. We have one per month. If we could take smaller chunks of work and focus at particular meetings. We're going to talk about hiring practices anyway, so it's a natural fit to talk about Arlen's suggestion during that discussion time. So perhaps Arlen, Pam, and I can chat about, that possibility when we meet tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Sounds like a great plan.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, well, that's all I have, Karsten, unless you want to say anything else.
No, I want to just thank everyone for the discussion. I thought it was really worthwhile. So we appreciate it very much. It's going to be good for our students and community.
Yes. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Jess.
I would echo that, Kirsten. I just think this is a really good opportunity for us to have these kind of discussions. When we didn't have our monthly workshops, these kind of discussions we didn't have time for in our regular meetings. And it's nice to be able to carve out some time to have some very meaningful conversation and also some very pointed action steps. I mean, we took a 2-hour conversation and we have very specific things that we're going to work on and come back and prioritize. So that's really great. And that was what our hope was for this evening. So thank you. It's really great and it's exciting and I'm very energized. I hope you are too. We are at the 2-hour mark, but I want to be cognizant of our time, but also if anybody else has any last comments before we adjourn for the evening. Anybody else?
I'll just say, Madam Chair, thank you, Jess, for presenting this, giving us, you're a good facilitator, as they say. You got us to speak. You got us to pull things out of us that will hopefully be beneficial down the road. This is just a start, but a good start. And I thank you for leading that. And we'll look to hear down the road as to how this kind of takes place and shapes up. So thank you.
Yeah. Ditto.
All right. Well, we did include the Red Wing Policy 1000 in the board packet. I'm sure that we've all had time to just kind of peruse that, but it does speak a little bit to our commitment to addressing this topic.
And perhaps that might be a good place to start when we want to draft an equity statement of our own, but personalize a little bit more. So go ahead and take a look at that. And then our next meeting, we'll have a regular school board meeting next Monday. That would be October 5th. 6 p.m. We'll meet virtually right here. And then if we have nothing else on the agenda or anybody else has anything else to add, we will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Jim?
Motion to adjourn made by Jim. I need a second.
Second,
Right
Jake.
here.
Heidi Jones, second.
Oh, Heidi
It's a
beat you to
toss-up.
it. Sorry. All right, we'll start with Mr. Christensen. We're voting to adjourn.
Let's do it.
Arlen,
Aye.
Janie,
Aye.
Heidi,
Aye.
Holly,
Hi.
and chair votes to adjourn. So the meeting is adjourned at 8:01 p.m.
Jim
Thank you,
votes-
everyone.
Jim votes aye too.
Yep.
Goodbye.
Oh,
Good, thank
sorry.
you.
Did I miss you, Jim?
I
Sorry,
made the
Jim.
motion, you just.
I'm like, that's only 6 people.
All
I
right,
marked
thanks,
you
guys.
up that you voted, so sorry about that.
No problem. Have
I
a good day, everybody.
anticipated.
Good night. Have a good night. See ya.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.